you for being here once again. My name is Gabby. I'm a business analyst here at Cogent. We have Edgar here with us, which is our associate director at Cogent as well. And we are very happy to have Anthony Jones back to another Tech Social. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us again. Today's topic is behind the screens, a day in the life of a cyber threat detective. Pretty interesting topic. I'm sure we're going to get pretty great insights today. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat section, or you can also raise your hand. We will take your questions. So thanks again for participating in this event, Anthony, and over to you, Ed.
Yeah, definitely, as you said, right? I'm very glad to have Anthony back with us today. And I believe something that I want to do particularly today is, try to debunk some myths that are around there regarding cybersecurity. I think it's like I've been always curious about some of them. And maybe one question for you, Anthony, but let's leave this one all the way to the end, right? Is it really like in the movies? So, like really wanted to hear more about that. So, yeah, over to you, and please tell us a bit more about this particular topic. I know that you proposed it, so what kind of things you want to tell us about your daily life and like the kind of things that you do in your day to day.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for having me back again. This has been, great. I mean, a lot of things have happened over the past couple of weeks, and to give you guys an idea of what I do, and how I do it. I am a cyber threat intel analyst. And what that means is I am the guy who is looking for the threat actors, the cyber criminals, the people who will go on the network and do some nefarious things to your information potentially. So what I try to look up are reports, evidence to the fact of there is something happening on your network or in your organization or outside of it. Alert your stakeholders, your bosses, your supervisors to that particular threat. So then all these cyber operators who worry about the servers, worry about the ports, worry about, information getting exfiltrated without their permission, getting out of the organization. I'm trying to help them get ahead of that. A lot of times what happens is that, CTI people are kind of behind the eight ball in the sense of we are detectives. If you look at us from like a position of like police or fire or whatever, we're coming in after the fact, after the information has been exfiltrated or attempted to determine how the adversary or enemy or however you want to label them got in. Are they still in the system? Where are they going to go next? And how can we kick them off and make sure that the system that they got into is a little bit harder to break into, in the future. So I am, doing that. Also, to be a CTI person, you have to be a really good storyteller, in that you're swaying a person's opinion about a course of action that they should do. So I have to make sure that all of my information that I'm looking up is, relevant, timely, and I have to convey that information in a way that the person, one, understands, because a lot of people who are in charge may or may not understand cybersecurity in a way that is, I'm going to say helpful, but they may not understand. Let's just say they may not understand. So I have to be able to tell them in a story sort of format. And sometimes in layman's terms, this is what's going on within your organization. These are the threats to it. And these are the actions that I recommend that you take. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I do on a daily basis. But we can get more into like how I do my job and what does it look like as far as a day in the life of me specifically as we go
on. Absolutely. So the first question that comes to my mind is, whenever we are talking about security, in perhaps as a way for me to understand it a bit better as an analogy, right? I can think about, somebody that is taking care of your physical location, just as an example or an analogy, right? And then when you are in that scenario, then you would see people coming, right? And then or perhaps you are kind of monitoring the security cameras, and then you get to see directly like something is moving, and then you can kind of go and see what's going on. So how is it that you actually get to see this kind of movements in this virtual world? Like, how is it that you notice something and you said, okay, what's going on here?
You know what? A lot of it's teamwork. And what I
Okay.
do on a daily basis is ask a lot of questions of different organizations, people within my sphere of influence in terms of my community, my organization, to see what they're seeing. Because while I am monitoring everything, I need people's help to help me see things that I may be missing. Think of it like this. In Intel and CTI, you're standing underneath a waterfall with a shot glass, and you're trying to catch all the information at once, and you're missing a lot of it. So if you have a bunch of people with a lot of shot glasses of their own, they can say, well, I saw this, and you saw this, and you saw this. Maybe we can put that information together and see the bigger picture. So that's one way of looking at it. But in terms of like how I do it in cyber, there's threat feeds, there are bulletins, there are, podcasts, there are webinars, there are a whole slew of ways to ingest the information. But sometimes too much information could be a bad thing too, in terms of I try to go one open source, at least go to open source, a private source of information, and then a governmental source. Open source because typically when an attack happens, it's publicized by the adversary or by somebody who is, constantly monitoring. But the con with that is, and that's a pro, but the con with that is that everybody's leaning in and giving their opinion about it. So they're taking their shot glass and like, okay, well, this is what I see. This is what I think is happening. That may not be the case, but this is what I think. So you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. The private sector or the data feeds that you're getting from like CrowdStrike or Recorded Future is a good way of looking at it because they're paid for. So they're going to evaluate the data a little bit harder than just open source people just throwing information out there. But even then, their sensors only can extend so far in terms of it may be monitoring your organization, what's inside of your house, your perimeter, or whatever analogy you want to use. So you may not have the visibility overall. So you go to different types of tools. Like I said, Recorded Future might be one, CrowdStrike might be another, and you kind of put them together to give a bigger picture. And then governmental sources like an information and sharing analysis center like an ISAC. So for me, I'm in the ISAC healthcare sector. So I'll look at that, and they typically are sharing information amongst themselves and in the community. And hopefully they're trying to do some type of attribution or figuring out who is doing the actual attacking and how and where they're going to go next. So once you put all the information together, you can package it and say, okay, this is what's happening in your house. So as I'm looking at your cameras, that's one feed. I'm asking the security guard, what did you see? Then I'm like, okay, inside your house, like, do you notice anything missing? If we're going to put it in the physical world and kind of put it all together. And as I gather that information, I'm telling the owner of the house, like, okay, so based on the cameras, based on the security guard, and based on like the people that are living in your house, this is what I see, and this is what I think you should do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that definitely makes sense. I really like the idea of, like going to different sources and having that opportunity to compare the information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, yes, the government, like shares this kind of information, but do you think it's really like some information that you would get out and you would be able to access really quick? Because whenever I think about the government, I can think about, all the security measures that they have in place and how private they want to be to some extent for certain topics. So I'm thinking, what would be like the most important part there, that they inform people that there's an attack in place, but they have to figure out first what's happening? Or is it like, what, we are seeing this and it's kind of weird and this is what we know, and it's out there kind of immediately for everyone to, to know about it? So how does that work in your experience?
So I've seen it several different ways, and it all depends on honestly who's in charge and what rules that they are operating under. So let's start with the government or defense sector. We have security levels of security clearances, and based on what level of security clearance it is, that may slow down the information flow in that I may have a higher clearance than you, and you may not. I may not be able to give that information and pass it on along to you. So that slows things down. Also, with the government, again, they're trying to do attribution, so they're taking their. No, I'm saying they're taking their time, but they're going through the due diligence of trying to figure out exactly what's going on before they put information out. Just to have to go back and refute it because there's another piece of information that comes out. So, there's some pros and cons there. Then whatever system or framework that you're under, there's a certain methodology or process that you're trying to follow in order to make
Mhm.
sure that the information you're putting out to the overall community is relevant, is timely, but is also accurate enough that they can help another organization do their due diligence of protecting their organization. So there's a couple of helpful measures, but they also introduce roadblocks. Now, when you get into like say the private sector, they have measures too, depending on like proprietary information. So if you're looking at PHI or PII, that information may not be able to be released immediately to another organ at all to another organization. And a lot of the
Mhm.
attacks that they're looking at centers around that information. So you can't disclose. So that slows it down. And then how they do their business is another thing. Legal holds is another issue because as the attack is happening, the first thing you want to do is alert the community, but you may not be able to because legally
Mhm.
speaking, stakeholders might say, okay, we're losing money if we disclose that we got breached. So legally speaking, we want to go ahead and keep that close hold for our stakeholders, for the people that's like giving us, profiting the company, but also there might be some information that we are not considering that might be sensitive in nature that we can't tell people about. So I think there's not like a best way of doing it. It's just kind of a way of doing it. If that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow, I mean, just just by these 10 minutes that we have spoken, right? It's like it actually reveals like the complete complexity that is like out there. And it's not
Right.
not just like I'm seeing something, I'll do something, you know. Uh, so it's pretty interesting. So you also mentioned open source, right? That you go and check this open source, type of information. And that leads me to think at the same time that as you can go and do that, so can the other actor, right? Like your counterpart, if we want to say it that way. So maybe it becomes like a tennis match, like, right? Where you go get information, learn about it, but maybe there are these guys going and also getting new ideas from there. So how is it in reality? Do you see this kind of, I do something, then you do something else, and is it something like that?
Oh yeah, there's always a counter. There's always a action and there's a counter. There's a counter to the counter, and
Mhm.
it's kind of the interplay back and forth between the two sides. Like, okay, you find a hole in my security, I plug it, and then I put up a big wall behind it. Then it's like, okay, well, how am I going to climb over the wall or go underneath the wall to get into your house or your castle or whatever you want to call it? So you see that back and forth, and then like, okay, what type of tools are you using to defend? What type of tools are you using to attack? And we had this discussion a few weeks ago about AI, and AI is speeding up the attack cycle for the adversary because now rather than taking ransomware tools, it's taking I don't know days, weeks to build. It's like okay, we're testing it in like within a matter of hours, probably faster than that, just because we have the AI helping us out to build a better, bigger, stronger, faster tool. So I see the whole back and forth every day, and that's why that's why the cybersecurity space is really complex. It's not like a traditional degree that I tell people because people ask me all the time, like, what was your path and how can I, do what you do? And give me some guidance on where to go. I'm like, I can't, because we're all little snowflakes here. Because cybersecurity, what it does, there's no specific path. It really takes whatever's in your background and enhances it. So for me, defense, military, it took whatever's in my background and enhanced it to the point of, okay, I understand military networks really, really well, and I know how to defend them really, really well. I just have to add the cyber twist to it, and then seeing how the adversary does their twist to it. So there's never gonna be like I know everything about cybersecurity, because the attacks are always new and always happen. That's why we have these common vulnerabilities and exposures coming out every single day, and these alerts that come out every single day because somebody's figured out, oh, this is how I can bypass this, and this is how I can defend against this. And so back and forth, back and forth. So what we're learning right now is becoming outdated even as I'm finishing my sentence. So that's my thoughts on it.
Oh no.
On this same path, I actually want to know what is the most unexpected source of cyber threats that you have encountered in your CTI work, and how do you always manage to stay ahead of these emerging risks? Like you're saying, it could be they manage to find different ways every time.
So unexpected threats. I mean, to me, every day is a new exciting adventure, of unexpected threats. So right now, to me, it's more like AI-based threats. Or it's like what you call that, unexpected. Because with AI, it's really up to the imagination of the person using it. So the sky's the limit. And how do I respond to it? The way I respond to it is by really trying to understand what you can do with the AI, with the AI system, and the length at which people will go and use it. So I think in the last, podcast that we did, I was like, look, I love AI, but then it's kind of like not everybody should have access to it just because of what they're doing with it. So to me, the way I stay ahead of it is by keeping my ear to the ground and listening to people in the community and attending those webinars and seminars and all that to figure out, okay, what's the next thing that they're doing with this, and the next thing that they're doing with this, and are they creating some type of polymorphic attack or whatever. So every day's new, so I can't really put my finger on one exact thing, but I would say it is revolving around AI in my sphere of influence.
Got it.
Definitely. Okay. And you were also mentioning attribution, right? And I'm curious about it because I'm supposing that depending on who is taking that attribution for one attack, maybe, or if that is determined in this case by the government or some other party, then there might be particularities that kind of characterize them, and then that might lead you or give you some leads on how to or where to they might be leading to, right? Like where they are going. So is it important for you to know who is that party who is maybe creating these attacks, and how is that relevant at all?
Yeah. So now we're getting to the good stuff. Okay, attribution. Attribution is intense. It's a tough nut to crack, and here's why. The thing about attribution is everybody wants to know who's doing the attack, who's attacking the organization. But the thing about cyberspace is I can make it look as if I am somebody else attacking you. So it makes you think that this particular person is attacking. So let's attach names or countries to this. So for instance, North Korea has a hacker for hire program. You give them the money, you tell them the target, they will attack with their tools and everything like that. So let's pick Iran. Let's just pick on them for a minute. They want to attack the United States. They give the money to North Korea. North Korea takes their tools and their talent and they attack the United States. Okay, so we start seeing attacks from North Korea, and it's like, oh, okay, well, it's North Korea-based attacks. That's fine. bigger picture, Iran is in the background. They have an issue for whatever reason with us, and they're paying North Korea to do it. Now, if a good analyst will keep digging and digging and figure out, okay, what's the motivation behind North Korea's attack? Because everybody has a motivation. For North Korea's the money. For Iran, let's pick something like maybe there was a defense strategy that they didn't care for that the United States did. So to go a little bit further into that, we might say, okay, well, what do we do that would basically make Iran angry? For them enough to want to pay North Korea to attack us. So you have to go all the way back to do that. Now, here's another thing that most people don't realize. When 2020 happened, it was more of a black market or Black Christmas or Black Friday rather for a lot of these threat actors. They sold a lot of their tools on the dark web. So a Russian-based tool is out there for anybody to buy, right? So most analysts are like, okay, well, I'm getting attacked by this Russian-based tool, which means that Russia is behind the attack. Not necessarily. It could be a person in America who is using a Russian-based tool against an American target. It's kind of like saying, I have Microsoft Word on my computer. You have Microsoft Word on your computer, and we're using Microsoft Word for Farfetch to attack some company or whatever. So it looks like Microsoft is attacking a country, attacking some, an organization within our country, right? Not necessarily. This is where you have to get into these unique fingerprints because everybody uses tools differently. And I can guarantee you that I save my files in Microsoft, and we're going to use that analogy, different than the way you use your tools in Microsoft or name your files in Microsoft. So the way I do things and operate and the way you do things and operate, even though we're using the same program, could be different. But the way I do it, if you pick up on that, you might be able to identify, okay, well, that's Jones that's actually doing that attack, not anybody else, because he has all this stuff in uppercase, letters. He's got the date at the end of his, files. I've seen this before. I don't care that you think that Microsoft is attacking. No, he's using Microsoft's tool to attack our company, if we're going to, extend that analogy. And that's where attribution becomes hard because a lot of analysts, they just see a Russian-based tool. They go running towards that whole mindset, and they're missing the bigger picture. And attribution takes a lot of research, a lot of years, and sometimes you get your guy or gal, and sometimes you don't. But that's why it's kind of a tough nut to crack. It's fun when you get it, like when you figure out who it is. Like it's taking a while, but I got you. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that there's a lot of research behind it. So as a CTI person, you have to be willing to dig into the information, know some little nuggets of information that people are leaving, or those Easter eggs that people are leaving, and key in on it to build that tactics, techniques, and procedures picture.
Okay, so a lot of great ideas here, and something that you mentioned was, for example, you were speaking about North Korea, right? And then you used your calm, like everything's fine kind of tone that we really like. And that makes me think like something like, okay, so maybe Anthony is familiar with how North Korea kind of works, right? And maybe it's not that big of a deal based on your tone. That's why I thought like, okay, maybe he knows what's happening and everything is okay. So two questions based on that assumption. One is, has it been the case that you thought something like, okay, this might not be that big, but in the end, it ended up being big? And the other is, like, are there any particular organizations or, parties in this case that you really feel like, okay, I really need to put attention here because these guys might be really dangerous and like we really need to pay attention on what is happening. So what can you tell us about that?
Right. So I guess the first question, like things that I didn't think were big. I always look at it from the perspective of you never know how big it can actually be. So you need to take everything seriously. Can you go down the rabbit hole with every single report? No. It really means at the end of the day, you need to look at your sector and what's going on in your sector and take a look at other sectors too, to an extent, and seeing what potentially could happen. So courses of action is what we call in the military, the likely course of action, or most dangerous course of action. Is what we're looking at. So as you're reading the report, and it may not be anything right now, it's like, okay, what's the potential of this thing escalating? And if it does escalate, where could it go into the future? So that's my first thought when I'm going through the process of looking at, okay, how big could this actually blow up to be? Because you never know. I mean, when you're looking at attacks, something that's small could be a series of smaller attacks that leads to a bigger attack.
Okay.
So I look at it from that perspective. So your second question is was who should we be looking at, or how did you phrase it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Like, do you feel there are particular parties that you say, okay, these guys are, like really dangerous maybe, or have had this history and have really wrecked of things?
Yeah.
So we really need to pay attention here, right?
Yeah. So I always look at I call them the big four. I always look at the big four: North Korea, China, Iran, and Russia. I always looked at those because they have a focus and a level of, I guess, technical acumen. I know people in the comments are like, well, I don't think about North Korea like that. Think what you will, but I mean, don't fall asleep on them. They're focused. So I always look at the big four and what are they doing? What capabilities do they have? Are they partnering themselves with them? Are they establishing relationships with each other? Because, they're not working in vacuums. And then also, what is the motivation behind what they're doing? And that motivation could be just enough that they may present an escalation, as far as attacking a country like the United States. So I try to stay on top of those, but I also look at, I kind of try to look at everybody, when I'm building my cyber threat landscape briefing, I kind of look at everybody, but in the back of my mind, I'm always looking at those big four players, because they are nation states. They are, adversarial competition to the United States. And you always have to wonder, what are they doing in the background? Are they partnering with each other? All the things. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. So now that you mentioned that perhaps that there might be things like seeming small attacks, and then that may lead to a bigger attack, that kind of reminds me, I was just watching this series the other day, and it has monsters in it, and it has, like the superheroes that are kind of fighting against these monsters. And at one point, the monsters kind of get together and get organized, and then they said something like, okay, let's do a full attack, right? And all of a sudden, the heroes were kind of used to fighting one monster at a time, but all of a sudden they have to fight every monster that is out there. And that's where it it gets interesting. So does it happen like that in real life as well? Like sometimes you get multiple attacks at once, and these kind of things. And how do you respond? How do you prioritize? Like, what should I do next, right? And what would be perhaps like the emergency measures?
Right. So a lot of people, especially when you first start into, cybersecurity, I guess the way the curriculum is built is more like, okay, you're responding to one attack. Like, it's a distributed denial of service, and that's it. It's like, well, no, that's not it. People do multiple things. I might, for instance, if I was attacking, I might say, okay, as a distraction, a DDoS, a distributed denial of service. And then I might go ahead and try to do something else, like a phishing attack, and this and this and this, and to overwhelm my target. One, distraction with the DDoS, and then number two, try to get somebody to click on something, especially when they're distracted, certain times of day, certain events like holidays or whatever. That's what I would do. How do we respond to multiple attacks at once? So NIST they have a framework which they try to help. They built to try to help understand. This is the methodology you need to think about when you start, get in the middle of an incident response, because that's what you're doing. First thing you need to do is spin up your team, get them together on what's going on in the situation, get your intelligence people to start looking into the reporting to see if this attack has happened before and in the way that they're seeing it. Then you have your people in the SOC, as far as your cyber operators, looking through the log to see if it has been other information that has led up to that, because maybe there's been some information that's been exfiltrated, or maybe there's some polymorphic virus that's out there that's slowing systems down. There might be an email circulating around that's spreading this thing. So there's a lot of moving parts, but at the end of the day, you're following a particular flow, going from one stage to another to get to a final result of, okay, we've identified who is on the system, hopefully. We've isolated that particular or segmented off that particular network, hopefully. And we have trapped the adversary, or we have kicked them out of our network, hopefully. And all of that is happening all at once in real time. And even outside the process of all the cyber guys and gals doing their thing, we have legal, we have law enforcement, we have stakeholders who are making decisions. I can't go too much into it, but there was a couple of times I've been involved in the incident response, and we're up late at night, we're just working it and trying to figure out who's doing what, where they're going, how they're doing it. All the while we're giving updates to the boss, like, okay, hour 36, where are we? We're still working. We're still looking. Is it looking good? It's looking. It's looking. But so that's how we do. And depending on what industry or sector that you're working in, the framework that you're using will vary, right? If you're in banking, it'll vary. If you're in defense, it will vary. Typically, there is a similar methodology, but once you get into a certain organization, that methodology overall may not be, suitable for what you're doing. So you'll have to scale it back, or scale it up or scale it down based on, how your organization works. But overall, you're all working towards a goal of stopping the attack, slowing it down, kicking a person off the network, saving lives in some cases, especially in healthcare. You're doing all the things.
Just out of curiosity, Anthony, what has been the longest time that solving a threat have taken you or in your team?
Oh, let's see. I would say 4 weeks.
Wow.
4 weeks back in 2020. I can't go into specifics, but I'm trying to think of what I can actually say. It was 4 weeks. It was an organization that was honestly didn't have good cyber hygiene, and this particular organization they were first responders, and it was not a great day. It was not a great 4 weeks.
Right.
What we had to tell them, they definitely didn't want to hear it, but it needed to happen. But yeah, 4 weeks of doing the research, 4 weeks of doing the hunting, 4 weeks of trying to figure out what we needed to do, and who needed to do what. And at the end of the day, did we do our jobs, and did it get them back up and running?
Wow, long time.
Yeah. And it could go longer than that. It just depends on that's my experience, but I've seen experiences that go on for even longer than that, especially when you talk about ransomware, because you're negotiating with that organization that's encrypting your data, and it goes back and forth, back and forth. In some cases, months.
Wow.
And you're ransomware is a business. I mean, most people don't understand it. It is legitimately like a business. Like, I'm picking on Microsoft. Like, Microsoft is a business. They have a customer service center. They have tech support. Ransomware people have the same structure. I mean, do they have a physical address? No, but it's running like a business. So yeah, I've seen it longer than that, months. But for me, 4 weeks. Thank God.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple of questions coming from Ajay, and I think they are really good. So one is, what are the most common attacks you see, and how can we strengthen the security posture of companies?
Okay,
That's like one question, and then we have another. So
sure.
what do you think about that?
Most common attacks that I see from my perspective, phishing. Like hands down, phishing. I give a brief every single week, 3 times, 2 or 3 times a week, and it's phishing every single time.
Mhm.
And the way we can do better with phishing is to understand what phishing looks like. It has gotten harder now that AI has come into play because before phishing was you get this badly worded email from somebody you don't even know, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
this clearly is a phishing attack. I'm not clicking on nothing or mousing over anything. Now the attacks have been
Mhm.
coming to the point of, wow, this is really well worded, and it's very close to home to the point that I've had to
Mhm.
sometimes think, did I really sign up for this or did I subscribe to this? No, no.
Mhm.
So I'll call directly the number of, okay, I got an email from your organization. Does this sound familiar? Oh no, we're not on the list. Okay, delete it. Just so you know, I got this, others may get this too. So, but phishing,
Mhm.
I've seen since I've been in the business, that's been the number one thing. And education is the only way to really combat that overall, to recognize it, to understand it, and more importantly, know who to talk to about it that can help mitigate against it. So those are my thoughts on that.
Mhm. Okay. Yes, so no more prince from Nigeria anymore, right? They actually kind of make sense.
I know people who actually got tricked in that too. So I refrain from making jokes like that anymore because I'm like, oh, I actually know a person. I not want to do that
Oh, well. Yeah, I
Anthony, I
mean,
just want to add something to that because you're absolutely right. These phishing attacks are so sophisticated. They've got it down to the logo, to like a support number. I mean, a couple of these, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've been doing cybersecurity for 30 years. I would click on some of these because they're just so close, right?
anymore.
And you're in a hurry. And I see a lot of the elderly people, no offense, but they just don't know what they don't know, and these guys are clicking left and right. You know what I mean? And it's not their fault. It's sad, that
You
that's where
know,
we've come to.
yeah, and in some cases, you don't even have to click on the link. You just have to mouse over it, and it drops the
Yeah.
malware onto your system and does its thing.
Yep.
So it's even more dangerous than that.
Yeah.
mhm, mhm. Right, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to add something around those lines that sometimes in holidays, right, like relaxed, or maybe you're still sleeping and you kind of see a link, and it's a great offer and it's something that you wanted to buy, and then it becomes tricky, right? You really have to put attention, otherwise it can be dangerous. So based on a true story, unfortunately, but but it was sorted out in the end. So yeah. And so we have another question here. What are hacker groups you see most often? For example, Ajay was mentioning Anonymous, but and how big are they actually? I mean, is it something that really you get to see in like your daily life as part of your work, let's say?
So if we focus in on what I'm doing in the healthcare space, the group that I see the most, and okay, I'm gonna say that if I gotta tip my hat to them because they are very good at what they do. Don't get me wrong. If I ever met them in real life, I'd punch them in the face. Lockbit.
Mhm.
Lockbit, I guess 3.0 now. They are very, very good at what they do. I mean, they have a business model, their tools work, their processes, procedures, their techniques, they work. In fact, they had a heck of a run that I reported in the last 7 days, and they have they went through a swath across every sector from manufacturing to defense to healthcare. They're just attacking
Wow.
everything. So I would say Lockbit is a big one. um, because again, their stuff they just have them modeled down. Now, when you get into their affiliates, the people who take their information, their tools, and they try to go off on their own, like kind of a splinter group, if you will, and do their thing.
Mhm.
That's when the thing starts getting a little bit disjointed. For instance, you might see, I've extras traded like 1.2 terabytes of data, but I've given you no indication about when the deadline for you to pay the money is, or vice versa. Like I'm giving you a deadline, but I'm not telling you how much it is. Like, so the affiliates are not as, I guess, as together as the overall organization for Lockbit in particular. But those are the guys, if you really want to understand like a group of people who are doing their thing, bad guys that are just, they got their stuff together, Lockbit. If you really want to educate yourself, Lockbit. If you ever meet them, punch them in the
Okay.
face. But if you want to study, Lockbit.
All right, great. So, okay, two more things that I see here, right? One is, I think when you were speaking about this motivation that these bad guys may have, right? It really speaks to me like it's not only about the technical part, but maybe some, other sciences, right? Like psychology, maybe some sociology in there, and maybe, like history and politics and a lot of other fields that somewhat you have to be involved in to understand the context, right? So, and also perhaps, you mentioned that you are more like a detective. So do you have that kind of background? I mean, did you, kind of studied anything in those particular fields, or, how are these fields, like becoming relevant when you are doing your job, and how do they come together, basically?
Yeah. So what my background is, I came into the military as a all source intelligence analyst. So I took different sources of information from, geospatial, which is pictures, human intelligence, which most people think about, like interrogations, and then other sources of intelligence. And I put together into a nice, pretty picture to, brief a commander. So one of the ways that, helped me really kind of gear my mind to dive into research and get spun up on different groups of people like threat actors or adversaries. It was something called the Intelligence Preparation of the Battle Space. And what that is a document that is talking about the war from the ground up. I'm talking political, military, economic, cyberspace, everything. If you were to go into, say, attack a country, and it helps you build that knowledge base of who people are, how they do their thing, how they operate, all of it. So whenever I come into a situation, especially like a hacker group or whatever, and I don't know anything about them, I build myself in, intelligence preparation of a battle space, or IPB. And by the time I get to the end of it, I know way more than probably than I actually want to know about the group. So then it helps me understand, like, okay, when people are arguing back and forth, like, yeah, I think this is Lockbit, like, nah, I don't think it is, because based on historics, they are traditionally used to attacking this and this and this is the way they do this, this and this. So I can go back and forth with, a person, try to tell them, like, no, this is the way you need to think about it. Now, there are other ways and models that you can use, but that's how I do it. And I recommend anybody who is really trying to understand how and why groups do their thing, because you just don't wake up in the morning just thinking, I'm going to attack NSA today. There's a reason behind it, right? Whether it's just for fun or money, or maybe there's some political motivation. There's a reason there, and you're trying to figure it out. But models like that help me figure out why people do what they do and when they're going to do it. Did that answer the question?
That was great. And what about this part? Do you know people that actually do this for fun? Like, I can understand perhaps some of the other motivations. They sound more like, what you would normally see in maybe the movies. But just for fun, it's like, is it to prove something, like perhaps that they are very smart, or like very skilled, or what kind of fun do you think they are getting out of it?
So I don't want to get anybody into trouble, but I do know a few people who their mind is curious enough that they want to see if they can do it. Not for any money,
Okay.
not for any motivation. They have learned this skill and they're like, you know what? Excuse me. It's like, you know what? I actually want to see if this is going to work in real time, not in a lab, not in a, a play environment. I actually want to see in the real world if I can actually do this. And I'm like, look, if you do it, don't tell me. I don't want to know because I do not want to be an accessory to a crime. However, I some people do that. They just want to see if they can do it. Money is not a motivator, especially people who are new to cybersecurity. I'm not going to name names, but some people who get the tools from, like, say, Certified Ethical Hacker, and they see all these cool tools that hackers use, and I'm like, I wonder if I could do this on my own. They start out on their own network within a VM, and then they kind of just, I wonder if I could do this on my buddy's network or this network or this network. And they go, and that's where it kind of, into my mind, it kind of starts. Like, you start out like at home, and then you just expand out to the world, and then you get a lot more brazen. And then sooner or later, it's like you turn around and like, oh my God, I'm in NSA now. Like, I don't understand. How did I get here?
Right. Wow. Yeah, actually, I think overall it's like a field that has like all of these, I would say, mystery, right? For people that, and that we are outside, and that actually when I was studying my career and I started, like seeing networking and all of that stuff, back then, the internet was, like another internet, I would say. And then some of my friends, they had like these books, right? Like not even books. They were like just some sheets together and they were like, yeah, look at this. This is how hackers do things, and let's try that and that, right? And I was like, I'm not so sure about it. I mean, are we sure what we are doing and understanding what the consequences might be, right? So I was curious. I cannot deny that, but in the end, it wasn't like like really there. And you, in my opinion, you really need to know what you are doing. And otherwise it can be just out of your control, and you might end up doing things that you were not intending to do, right? So it's in that way, like as you if you were holding a weapon or something. So definitely, I would say, if you want to try something like this, from my perspective, you really need to know what you are doing. So, and I'm not even in that space. So what would be your piece of advice in that case?
I would say, if you're that curious, jail is a real thing. Jail is a very real thing. And if you're that curious, I would say, look, in a way of, maybe you could work for an organization that encourages this. There's parts of the government that's like, okay, if you got the talent and you have the interest and the motivation, we'll put you to work. We will take that curiosity and we will make it flourish, and we'll direct it towards a goal that will be beneficial to you, because you're getting the satisfaction of knowing that you're breaking into something and scratching that itch, and we're getting something out of it because we are desperately looking for talent. Like the U.S. government is looking for talent. That is the one thing that they're starting to realize, that a lot of these budgets that they have for traditional physical world things, they don't work because cyber, it's moving too fast. There's a pool of talent out there that, maybe they can't get a security clearance, or maybe, they don't fit the complete mold of what a government worker should be, but they have the talent that they need in order to get the job done. So if you're really looking to, I can use that, phrase, scratch that itch, you might want to start looking at organizations like, the government, or even in private sector. They have some hacker, some bug bounties that you can take advantage of. you're looking to, try to find bugs and ways into the system, and you actually get money for it, like thousands of dollars. I've seen some of my friends do it, and it's like, okay, I'm not that smart, but I wish I was, because then I could take advantage of that. But your mind is curious enough that you're willing to sit there for hours on end and try to find bugs. And while my mind is curious, my mind is more geared towards income. But yeah, I would give that advice to anybody that's like, um, going down that route. So, because honestly, it's really a matter of like your mindset, whether you want to like gear it towards your own personal gain and like, go down that road, or that road of, okay, I'm gonna bring this network because I think it's cool, or you can bring it to the network you think is cool and legally get paid for it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely, I would encourage our audience to listen to Anthony. He definitely knows what he's talking about. So
I know a little bit about a little bit.
Super cool. Amazing. Yeah. So unfortunately, it seems that our time's up, but I cannot think, about anything else than having yet another session, because this is so interesting, right? I really feel we could keep talking about this, like for ages. But before we finish, Anthony, what would you say, just not to leave this question open, is your job really like in the movies, or or what would be the parallelism that you can make there?
So I would say, and I wish I could show you my setup. My setup does look like it is out of a movie. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monitors going all at once. I have multiple tabs open.
Wow.
I have things running in the background and researching and researching and researching. Am I like, the show 24 where I'm just like sending data to redirect satellites? No, I'm not doing any of that. However, I am building that briefing. I'm walking into those meetings metaphorically to get a person's mind geared towards what I am thinking or recommended that they should do to protect their network a lot better. So it is kind of like a movie where, I can see that, but also it's a lot of research. It is a ton of research. So hackers also, you thinking, oh, I'll just plug an IP address and hit the go button. In some cases, that might be it, but they're doing a lot of research also. So I have to do twice, if not 3 times more research than them to stay ahead of them. But yeah, my typical day, I think if we still have like a minute, I wake up in the morning, I log into all my systems. Depending on what day it is, I might have to brief leadership on like, a cyber landscape threat briefing, which I start big picture, and then I work towards what's happening within the organization, trying to tell them, all the vulnerabilities outside of the organization that can affect you, inside the organization, anything I see that's relevant and things that you might want to take into consideration. Hopefully I walk away with a question or two that I can take for the rest of the week and kind of build upon a request for information of the RFI to answer by Friday to get back to them so they can make, other recommendations. It's a nonstop process, especially in healthcare. And again, I love it. I absolutely love it. I work 100% remote, so I get to do it to the comfort of my own home. So it's a good gig. It's a really good gig. But you have to have a curious mind. You have to be a storyteller. You have to be willing to dig into the research, and just have to be willing never to give up, honestly. So if you have those 4 things going for you, I highly suggest getting to cyber threat intelligence.
Amazing. All right. Well, thanks again, Anthony. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Gabby, for your for being here. We really appreciate it. It's been awesome, and hopefully we can get another one of these. So thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, definitely, Anthony. We'll keep in touch. Let's see, at some point we can have another session. It's always great to talk to you. So thank you for wanting to be here again. And then everyone, again, thank you. I'll see you all next week with another Tech Social. In this case, let me tell you in advance, it'll be in Spanish for our Latin community in US. So that's something different that we are going to do this time, but I hope to see everyone that speaks Spanish here next week. So yeah, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Anthony. Bye-bye.
All right. See you guys. Thanks. Yes.
Man.
Thank you, Anthony. It was amazing. I really
You know
enjoyed
what?
it.
That was awesome. I love doing these things. So anytime you guys want to have me back or talk, expand on anything, let me know. I love spreading, information out there because there's a lot of people that they just don't know. Because when I first started, I
Mhm.
didn't know. Nobody told me like, okay, oh, I need to think about this or this is what's really happening. So if I can help
Mhm.
or I can do anything, let me know. Please let me know. I'm more than willing.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely will. Actually, I kept some questions, right, that I wanted to ask. So
Sure.
that calls for another. Yes, amazing. And I really like what you do, right? That you're spreading the word because, as you were mentioning, right? I think that's the best way to, be protected. So thank you for that.
No worries. No, anytime.
All right.
Thank you, Anthony.
Amazing.
Thank you, Edgar.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Then
Thank you.
see you soon.
Absolutely.
All right.
Have a great
Definitely.
rest of
Have
your
a
day.
good one.
Bye. Thank you.
You too.